We've been talking together about productive versus destructive conflict. And we've been talking about William Urey's notion of how to get past no and his 5 strategies. We've already talked about the first 4. Don't react, get on the balcony. Don't argue, step to their side. Don't escalate, educate. And don't reject, refrain. The 5th one is don't push, build them a golden bridge to retreat. I love that phrase. It's a quote from Sun Tzu and The Art of War, where he said, build your adversary a golden bridge to retreat. Now, in this particular case, what the image that it draws up is the idea that, have you ever been in a situation where you're in some kind of dispute, some kind of conflict, and you've kind of painted your opponent into a corner? You've gotten to the point where you know you've won the argument because there's no way out for your opponent. And all they've got left is their pride. But they're going to keep arguing in order to preserve their own pride. Or maybe it's entirely possible that you've been painted into a corner and the only thing that you've got left is your pride. What this point recognizes is that it's my job to preserve the face, to save face for the other party. It's my job to preserve their honor, to get them to the point where they don't have to lose. Because remember, our goal is a mutually agreed upon solution. It's not a victory. And if I have crushed them, then I've gotten to the point where I have a victory and they don't. I need to find some kind of a mutually agreed upon solution. And so oftentimes what that means is I throw them a bone. I figure out some kind of way of getting them something that I didn't have to offer them, but something that allows them to save face. Let me give you the world's cheesiest example, the tiniest little example, but it's the one that I hold in my head whenever I am in a conflict situation. My wife and I once upon a time made a terrible mistake. When our kids were about 4 or 5 years old, we taught them to read. And now they are addicted. And it's just terrible. When our kids were 8, 9, 10, 12 years old, every night we'd go to tell them it's time to go to bed or put them to bed, and we'd have the same thing happen. We'd come in there, they would be laying in bed, they'd be surrounded by their books, they'd be reading, and we'd say it's time to turn off the light and go to bed, time to go to sleep, and they would say the same thing. Can I read to the end of the paragraph? Can I read to the end of the page? Can I read to the end of the chapter? Depends on how old they were. And at that point, we had this kind of almost ritualized little battle that we would have about how long it. And ultimately, what we realized is how to not make it a battle. So if my daughter would say, can I read to the end of the paragraph? The answer was, yes, of course you can. I would stand there. She would read to the end of the paragraph. I would take the book. I would put it over here. I would kiss her goodnight. We would go through our nightly routine. I would turn off the light. In other words, I had to recognize that what she was saying at that moment was, can I give you exactly what you've asked for in 30 seconds? Or can we spend the next 15 minutes arguing about it? And I needed to build her a golden bridge to retreat, a way to save face, a way to get a little something so it's not completely a loss. Remember, people don't resist change, they resist loss. And if I could give her this the tiniest little victory, that would allow her to feel like it wasn't a pure loss. It's like, oh no, I gotta go to sleep now. Now, I gotta confess that we were doing this, and somehow my dad found out about this. And my dad was appalled. My dad thought, no, don't you understand that your authority's at stake when you have to, the child should do what you tell them to do. And I said, Dad, as long as I can pick the child up and move them from place to place, neither of us is confused about our authority. Because remember, we've talked about how your authority often gets in the way. If it feels too much like there's an asymmetrical authority relationship, that I have too much authority over someone, they feel dominated. And now I have a victory, but they have a defeat. And that the only way that I win is for them to lose. And if our goal is a mutually agreed upon solution, then what I need to do is find a way to build them a golden bridge to retreat. I need to find the way to save their face. And I can't tell you how many times I've used that in working in the church. How many times I've used that in working in my school. How many times I've done that working in nonprofits, where there are Christians who think that I'm doing what I'm called to do. And as they are doing what they are called to do, the very last thing they want is to feel dominated, to feel like they have to lose something in order to accomplish what they need. And so oftentimes what I have to do is come up with some kind of a way to offer them something that allows to be a tiniest little victory, but something that I didn't have to give them, but something where they feel like they got something out of the deal. Ury has argued that the best way to help somebody is not just to push them, but to build them a golden bridge to retreat. And I need to tell you one other piece about this. When I have my students come back years later and talk to me about conflict, there are two things that they tell me that ended up being a significant part of their life that they did not expect. One is the phrase, "This conflict will not undo us." The other is this idea of building a golden bridge to retreat. That once they internalized that, they found themselves using that in almost every meeting, finding some way where they had to save somebody's face, some way when they just had, as part of the agenda of every single encounter, is I need to find a way to save your face. It's my job to save your face, not yours. And what it ended up doing is creating massive amounts of trust, because oftentimes authority makes it hard for someone to trust you because you have the power to do bad things to them. But if over and over again you've saved their face, they now develop a trust that says, you will not use your authority to crush me. That's what they mean by don't push. Build your adversary a golden bridge to retreat.